How's it going, everybody? I know I just do the random posts nowadays, but with my job at Enphase as a field application engineer and the generator guy, and now as a product trainer, they keep me running pretty hard. And it makes it kind of hard to film content at the pace that I'm running, of maintaining that and working on the off-grid house. I've actually made some really amazing advancements in the off-grid house in the last 3 months, but primarily because we had some life changes and wound up buying a pretty cool place in town. And we're kind of migrating to, well, we've actually moved to that house, come here on the weekends and stuff to work on it and play. But it's been that's been a wild ride. We've been in the off-grid place now we've had it for 12 years. And I'll try to insert a picture in here what it used to look like. But this place was trashed when we got it. It was a foreclosure. And gosh, I would say it was like camping for the first 6 months. I'm lucky that my wife put up with it. And there's been a whole host of challenges living off the grid throughout the 12 years, because the well was like a low yield well. We didn't really have a lot of information when we got this place, what was going on. Everything was gone. Also, there was no generator, no well, no floors, no doors. It was basically just a destroyed, gutted house. And I probably should have started YouTube and all this stuff back then, but it is what it is. So I guess what I would kind of talk about today is some of the advancements that I made over the last few months that I wasn't able to film. I had started talking earlier in some previous episodes in the last year about some of the issues that I had with the well and what I was planning on doing. And one of those being was the well previously was just a standard well like a standard well configuration where it has a well seal on the top and the water comes out through a top fitting and then, is plumbed out over the side and all the electrical comes in the top. And one of the things that we did was I did finish that project, and I'll take you out there in a minute, but I wound up having a well pump company come out, and that was a battle. I miss having a well pump truck, but I had them lower the pump 16 feet. What was happening was when I originally put it in, the full 20 feet was too long. It was sticking out of the ground, and so I had to shorten that pipe, and I just didn't have the tools at my disposal to do it then. So as I was getting ready to sell the house, I've always battled the low yield water scenario out here, and I lowered that pump, and I actually found where the water came in. It doesn't have a high static. It's like more of a river. It flows through. And so now that I have the pump where it's actually supposed to be, I'm pumping more water than I even need here, which I guess that would have been nice to do a long time ago, because I've had some pretty good battles with the water. I would say that's the biggest thing with off-grid is really like your water company, your power company, and it really pays to be a handy person living off the grid. It really pays to be a handy being a person that wants to take care of yourself, right? That's why I got into off-grid in the beginning, or even solar renewables, was I wanted to be able to take care of myself and be independent. And thankfully I have a high aptitude of learning the stuff and teaching myself, most anything. So I was able to kind of accelerate at this. So I guess what I'll start off with talking about was I've showed my generator setups in the past. This is actually going to be the configuration that I sell the house with. And what I really changed from it previously was I've always had a generator panel, like an AC distribution panel at the generator. And I used to put meters in here so I could just track how much power the generator was actually supplementing out to the system. But what I changed on this revision, and I actually did this even before I knew I was going to sell the house, because this was kind of like, this is how I would want this. I typically build everything like this. So the way that the panel alignment goes is this is the generator output. And I always put a panel here, even though it's just a single output, because I have a box to go underneath it that could be for like a portable generator that I can toggle between the two. Because when you're off grid, you always want layers of redundancy, right? So of course I also have spare generators out here. So if there was a problem with this generator, I could hot swap it, but I very easily could just do a lockout. That's not in here yet, but I could put a toggle to where I could just do a plug-in portable generator here, as well as have the standby 20 kW Kohler, which is adequate easily for this house that we have. The next panel that's right here is there was a circuit that was ran out here previously that's just a couple number 10s, so 30 amps. This house is a fairly low draw. I mean, for the most part, the well pump is a Grundfos SQ Flex and only draws like 1.5 amps on AC, which I have it running off 120 AC out there. It's a very low draw, which I've changed some of that configuration too. So this panel is just a AC distribution panel for stuff out in this area, the battery charger for the generator, the timer for the irrigation, because I've actually put some plants in now, and also the timer for the well system, which I've relocated up here, which used to be out at the well. I was originally on that Grundfos using like one of those wall timers, the 120 volt ones just for lighting. That well pump is such a low draw on the AC that I was able to do that. And then having a low yield well, I needed to be able to really configure multiple times throughout the day and a varying amount of time, because the well production dropped throughout the year. And then one of the other things I added was this security light up top. It's really just a light that I can turn on. They were stadium lights that I found on Amazon that light up the whole field at night. So if I'm out here messing around, or if there was any kind of event I wanted to turn them on, I can. Got it configured so I could remote do it, but I didn't quite get to that far. So for right now, it's just a breaker turn on. And then in the third panel, I wanted it to look the same as a standard panel, or at least the rest of the panels. So in here, I just have my irrigation timer, and I also have the well timer that I bought that now runs the Grundfos pump. And it's a little bit, I think it's just a little bit more long-term solution than what I had going before. So it all turned out very clean. So, and I guess as far as the generator, one of the other kind of upgrades was last year, my daughter Kaya and we ripped the 14 kW Kohler generator out, and we upgraded it to one of their new 20 kW RCA units, and we hand poured this pad. It turned out great, and I'm really happy with this unit and the way that everything turned out. So yeah, so let's go walk out to the well. Okay, so like we were talking about earlier, this well, hopefully there's no rattlesnakes. Okay, so this well previously, like I was saying, was it had a well seal on the top, and so the water came out, you know, it did a standard 90, went in the ground, and then I had a water meter in here, which I still have. I kept all that, and I'll explain why in a second. But what I changed was the original casing that was here was barely above the ground, and there really was never a well seal put in here. And so one of the things we had to do was we had to elevate the casing. I just wanted to get it safely above the ground. And then we had a pitless installed. So now the water comes out underneath the ground and then goes into the valve box and the meter to go up the hill to track it. So this is much easier for serviceability. Honestly, I think as a contractor, if I ever go back to building off-grid houses, I would never do anything but this. And it's more about the ease of serviceability, right? If I need to change the pump, I don't have to disconnect all of the plumbing that's going out up into the house. The electrical just comes in here. It's easy to disconnect. To get the pump out, you just have a stinger that goes in here that threads into a saddle kind of fitting that pulls the pump out. And if you were off grid and you're only 120 feet, you could easily poly pipe this and pull this out yourself. I'm sure you watch my buddy Scott. He's got this cool little wheel that you just grab the poly and jerk it out, and it makes it super simple. So as far as off-grid stuff, this is the only kind of like setup I would put in myself going forward. Now what I had to do here was, this was a low yield well, and I've always struggled with the production, and it's very hard water. So one of the thing that an old timer kind of taught me, a well guy, was that these older wells like this, they can get plugged up. And so what you can do is you can actually take, and by having the serviceability of the top, you can pull the cap off, and you can buy a powder concentrate of what's called hypochlorite, which is a high concentrate of chlorine, and it's powder form, and you add it to water, and then by adding that hypochlorite solution down, and then you actually fill the well up. You add water on it to create a really high static pressure to drive that hypochlorite down. You then take and turn off the output of your well going to your holding tank, because typically these are all open discharge, and that's where the hydrant comes in. So with the configuration I have right now, I can turn off the water going up the hill and only use the hydrant, and I can take and run a hose down here, and I can circulate that hypochlorite in the well as I'm adding water, and run that to try to free up and clean that that calcium buildup that's in there, and then discharge the water out until it's clean, and then continue holding it. I haven't had to do that now that I've lowered the pump. I think I've found actually where the better water intake is for it. So it's just kind of set up so that it could be serviced later on. So going out the boxes, I just have two valves, one going uphill, one going to the hydrant, and then a future for the garden. And then I have my standard water meter that's in here because I really like to see how much water my wells are pumping. Even though it's off grid, it's handy to have, just especially when you're in California. Our water tables are varying, and you can kind of see if your production's dropping and you're ever hitting your safety on your well. So that's kind of the upgrades that I made in the well system. Oh, and I poured a pad as a well seal, right? So the well seal just stops water from pulling up around your casing and following your casing down to your aquifer and contaminating it. So this pad should help with that. The newer wells that are drilled, the way that I understand it, because I'm not a well guy, so take everything that I said on the hypochlorite as do your own diligence, but this is what I've read and learned and what I've planned on doing. But on the well seal, this just stops groundwater saturation from getting down and contaminating your wells. So I kind of did everything that I could to upgrade this to make this a good long-term solution. Okay, let's go look at the air conditioning. So this was probably one of my wife's favorite upgrades that I did at the off-grid house. Last year at the kind of middle of the year, I put in a Fujitsu mini split system with 3 heads. This is a 36,000 BTU variable speed unit that goes to the 3 heads in the house. I prepped this pad to make it bigger because one of the issues that I was running into is I didn't want to do whole home air conditioning or heating in this house off the mini splits because the fact that it's so big, I felt like doing zoning for an off-grid house was the best way to go. The other thing that was kind of tricky about it too is this house, the first floor is 3,000 square feet. And so putting in a unit, it would be almost 6 tons in my environment for the heat, right? Because it gets so hot here. So that means that you're gonna have a higher continuous to cool that whole area off. Fujitsu does make a unit that'll run a dual stack condenser like this, a taller one that will go in and replace my existing furnace to give it a heat pump effectively, so it'll do heating and air conditioning. They have a 5 and a 4 ton unit, that's what this is prepped for. To get to the 6 tons, the way that I was kind of looking at it by doing this system, I have it designed to be split. So this 36,000 BTU unit will cool off the 2 bedrooms and the office of this place. And then the system that's planned for here next would be the FAU replacement version, which I think I could get away with a 4 ton. And what that would do is then that would cool off the living room, the dining room, the kitchen, and kind of the hallway and bathroom kind of area. And then what I can do is if I had to run all of those units to try to get to that 6 ton for adding the cooling capacity or heating, I could. But if I also just want to focus on the bedrooms and use in the wintertime the fireplace to heat the house, that just reduces my overall output. And so when we look at off-grid, kind of, trying to be as, use the whatever resources that are the least amount of, power requirements as you can, or you could just go for simplicity and turn it on and let it rip. The system that we have in the power room right now with the 4 Outback inverters, I have 2 left to hook up. That's my last big project for the off-grid house. Once I have those all installed, it should have no problem running the heating and the cooling system, which this is by far the largest load on the house, and which you'd really only need, a couple months out of the year. It gets pretty hot in Redding. We hit 115. And so, you typically would want to try to use your house as like a thermal battery, where you're, getting it as cold as possible when the sun's out, and trying to keep that thing cool so that in the nighttime when the sun goes down, you're kind of minimizing what your power requirements are for cooling your bedroom space. And that's where this split system kind of comes up, because in the nighttime, when you're primarily kind of focused on trying to heat and cool just your bedrooms, this the multi or the room mini split heads would be way more power efficient than the standard full house system. So it makes it quite a bit better. So this has been probably my wife's favorite upgrade, because she hates the swamp coolers. I did leave them hooked up and in place, but this overall for me doing it myself turned out pretty awesome as well. So let's hop in the side-by-side and we'll go look at one of my last big projects, which was the water tanks. All right, so the other really big project that I wrapped up, this was last year, was the water tank system. We previously only had one 2,500 gallon tank, and that just wasn't quite enough with the water scenario, because I did have to bring water in a couple times, which I don't think I will this year because the well's just rocking, and I'm using more water. But one of the things that I needed to do was I had to add another water tank. And if you want to know, like, I looked at every water tank that I could buy locally, and I really found that when we look at the water tanks and like how much transmissible light visible light would go through the tank, the best tanks by far at anywhere was Tractor Supply. This tank is solid black. It's like this one that I have behind me. I looked at a lot of them, and like if you go look at the tanks at Home Depot or Lowe's, or even the ones that they carry at like my pump wholesale place, they have a lot of visible light transmission coming through, which is going to ultimately, I think, lead to some algae growth. So I want my water tanks to be completely black. I'm actually not adverse or against painting them, but hey, it is what it is. So I have this whole core all dug out, and I actually have it prepped back here for another tank as well, or filling up external tanks, because out here you're doing things remotely that need water. So I have it set up so I can fill my my tow behind water tank as well off of this. So it makes it pretty handy. So this distribution right here is just for electrical infrastructure, just for futures, for doing any kind of tank monitoring, anything that might want to be done. But then the other thing that I did is I found this irrigation box at a big yard sale, and I stuck this in here. And so now one of the things that I hated, that I struggled with before on my original design, was I had all the valves underneath the ground, and I had a couple unions in there. And over time, those just fail and they leak, and it drained my tank 2 different times. That really sucked. So as I redesigned this, I put this configuration in here to where I have it pre-filtering. And again, this is only flowing 5 gallons a minute max. So it's barely touching any of this setup. So I have a filter system in here that's pre-filtering all the tank fills, which keeps it cleaner because we have a lot of iron. And then I have the fill for both the tanks going in, and they're both, when I set these tanks, I set the new pad, I had to build it up. I set them completely level so they fill up the same. And at this point in time, only the tank behind me has an overflow. I don't have a way to shut the tanks off because that infrastructure was never ever put in the beginning. And so basically what happens is when this tank gets full, it just overflows and discharges into the pond, which I think, I don't know, just keeps the water tanks cycled anyway, so it's not a super big deal. But yeah, this turned out super good, and I like how all this worked out. And I have a bag that I put over this, or like an insulating bag, but I put over it in the winter time, so the other insulation is just secondary. So yeah, that was my other big upgrade for the year. So hope you made it through all that, and I hope that's entertaining. If you got any questions, let me know, and I'll try to answer them the best I can. And if I have time and I can remember, I'll continue this at my new house and show you when I'm working on that one, because that one's on the grid, and that's going to have some really exciting stuff happening. All right, well, I decided to talk about the new house. And for those of you that actually have known me, I got quite a few people that have followed me for quite some time. Boy, this is really going to be shocking for you guys, because most people say, well, how could you move in, like, you're doing it backwards, like everybody's moving off the grid, and now we're going back on the grid. But I mean, you kind of got to look at it like this. Like, being on the grid is typically a mindset for me, right? Because I'll take this on-grid house and have this thing off-grid in no time. Because the way the cosmic things align, as soon as I sell that off-grid place, you know the fit's gonna hit the shan. This is my philosophy. So thankfully, one of the things I didn't talk about at the other house, which I'm gonna start doing more content as I wrap that place up, because I think it's gonna be kind of exciting what we're doing at the power room. I'm actually gonna wind up taking the woodshop off-grid system off, or the batteries off, and putting those on the main system with the Outback. So I'm gonna run the Outback VFX inverters with the Discover batteries. I still feel that the Discover batteries are my favorite. I like the accessibility that I can basically take a laptop and access the BMS, and I like that I can change the BMS if there's a problem. And I've just had good experience with the Discover battery. So as far as DC coupled stuff, because we got to differentiate, right? My day job now is, of course, through Enphase. You know, a variety of roles there, but that is really AC coupled specialty type stuff. My background is very heavy and off grid, and that's something that I love. And that is still predominantly going to be, in my mind, a DC coupled type of topology, right? So if you don't know what that is, guess watch other videos. So as far as what am I doing with this house, and I guess what is some of my current role, let me show you. So our new house is, I don't know, located outside of the city of Reading, and I've started doing some infrastructure already, and I'll kind of show you guys. This is a piece of gutter that we put in last week. We've already started setting it up. One of my projects, oh, I forgot I set that in there. Let me pull that out. What I wound up doing was I dumped right out of the back of the main panel, put a piece of gutter in, and then piped up and over on the ceiling, and then put a receptacle in. Why is that exciting? Well, because that's gonna let me put in the new Enphase IQ EV charger. One of my current roles is to make all the product training for the new series of EV chargers. If you're following any of the stuff that we're doing off Enphase, it's going to be super exciting because yes, we are getting ready in the future to release bi-directional EV charging, or EV to home, which will be super exciting, right? So maybe you might not want a full storage system at your home, but if there's a grid outage, you can take and you can power your home off your EV, if your EV will support it. So we're really just starting to talk about it and do testing on it, but who knows, maybe I'll do some testing here, maybe. But let's go look at some of the other stuff we got. So, oh yeah, the hot rod is super happy to be at this house because no more dirt road. And yes, I'm in a full-blown subdivision at this house, which is really the hardest part about it is the downsizing of everything. You just stop kicking the tripod. So, okay, so this is the back side of that wall. This is just a standard 200 amp service. This does have an existing SunPower system that was actually installed by a company that I worked at when I was young. It's just, what's it got? It's got 15 335 watt SunPower modules, which is ultimately going to be removed because on the inside of the garage in there, I'll wind up putting an Enphase system on there. Either on there or I'm gonna wind up changing the gate. This gate is kind of in a crappy spot. I can't get my RV back here. So I'm either gonna put those batteries in the garage or do a trench across here and do a pedestal mount for some batteries where that bamboo plant is and shade them. So I'm really working kind of with a weird house here. Weird in the sense that it's a flat roof. And while I loved this house, I watched this house being built and I was like, oh, I would always live there. Well, we wound up buying it because my wife's a realtor and it kind of worked out. But the system that we have now, hopefully the pool system's not too loud, is on the pool house, and there's 15 panels there, and there's basically an AC combiner there in the corner. And what I'm gonna wind up doing is I still have at the other house, I got a couple pallets of solar panels. I think I'm gonna wind up taking and putting a ground mount system right on this back hill and put another 15 panels in, which will give me 9K roughly, which will be a pretty, I don't know, a pretty decently sized system. And should be pretty easy to connect into the panel right there. So yeah, and thankfully the infrastructure is big enough for all that. So yeah, so all in all, that's kind of, those are the changes that we've made. We're definitely liking our house in the grid, or on the grid. And thankfully it has solar, so the bills aren't too bad. I'd say the biggest bill that we've had is going to be from the heating the hot tub and all the stuff that's out there. So pretty exciting stuff for us, at least. And I haven't even talked about the rental that I bought last year that I started gutting before this whole thing happened. I've been so out of pocket building and doing everything that it's been pretty crazy. So pool people blasting through. Yeah, pretty crazy, huh? Kind of looks like an Arizona house, but you can kind of tell we kind of have like a odd house thing. But thanks for watching. Hope you guys liked the update. Hope it was interesting to some degree, and let me know if you got any questions. Have a great day.